In Luke, we have our pick of stories about wealth. There's the story of the rich young ruler, where that rich young ruler comes to Jesus, and he asks Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus tells him to keep the commandments, to which the ruler replies, "I have kept all these things since my youth." Jesus then tells him he is lacking in one thing and commands him, "Go, sell your possessions and give the money to the poor. Then you will have great treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." The rich young ruler goes away from that encounter sad because he has great wealth. Now that story is just before the one of the Good Samaritan. And then there's one a little later in Luke 12, where Jesus tells the story of a certain rich man. That rich man's land produces a bountiful crop, and he must build a bigger barn in order to hold it all. The man talks with himself, saying, "I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. I'll eat, drink, and enjoy myself." And this conversation with himself shows his isolation in and by his wealth. That story ends with the cry from God, "Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get those things you have prepared for yourself?" Presumably, the isolation of hoarding wealth means he doesn't even have an heir. Jesus says this is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves. And then there's this story about a shady manager. The story itself is a little morally ambiguous. A rich man realizes his manager is fleecing him and decides to fire him. When the manager figures this out, he makes it so he can get a job elsewhere by some dishonest tactics. His current boss commends him for being smart enough to make arrangements for his next gig. Jesus seems to present this story as a way the world works, even saying it's good to use worldly wealth to make friends for yourselves. But he's also clear that being faithful with wealth matters. And if we aren't faithful with worldly wealth that is fleeting, we'll never gain true riches. It's not the most direct of Jesus' teachings. All of those stories point to some problems with wealth, and we skipped over plenty others. This story of the manager, more than others, points to how Jesus consistently presents money as a tool. In Jesus' actions and words, money seems a necessary tool. Pay taxes, go buy food, things like that. But money is always and only a tool. And hoarding that money is never an action of those living in the reign of God. We'll come back to the problem of hoarding in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about money as a tool. Now, we know money as a tool most of the time. We use it to buy food and a place to live and a car and Legos and iPads and all of those sorts of things. Part of recognizing money as a tool also recognizes that the less you have of it, the more utilitarian that tool becomes. The less money people have, the larger the percentage of that money that gets spent on food, housing, utilities, and transportation. To put it another way, if someone is making Arizona's minimum wage of $11 an hour and works 40 hours a week, they bring in just under $23,000 a year, or $1,900 a month before taxes. With the cheapest apartment available in Gilbert coming in at $929 a month, they're going to be spending a much larger percentage of income on housing than someone making $20 an hour. Because we believe money is a tool, and have heard Jesus' call to care for the people who are poor, meaning they need access to that tool, we then look for leaders who are going to get money to people who do not have enough of it. That can happen in a variety of ways. So time and again, pilot projects find that the most successful programs for lifting people out of poverty through direct aid is actually just giving them money. Without fail, money given directly to people gets invested in education, in nutrition, in housing, in business development, in all of the things that create more wealth. In numerous pilot projects, including 4 under the Nixon administration in the US, giving people money made the most difference and cost far less to administer than programs distributing products like food. The money also stayed in the local economy, creating more growth and wealth there. In one particularly successful project, the rate of inflation, even with the increase in wealth, was less than 1%. In that same project, every dollar given to people generated $2.60 worth of total economic activity in the area in only 18 months. That leads us to the other easy way to get the tool of money to the people who need it: increase wages. When people with less money have more of it, they spend it in ways that are good for their family and benefit the economy. Most any news article on the economy will tell you that's how our economy works. And in the US, 70% of our economy is consumer spending. Well, that's a measure of the end result of the full economy, and there are many steps in between. Drops in certain types of consumer spending are almost always an indication of economic troubles for the US. Many of us remember that after the attacks of September 11th, we were told to go shopping as an act of patriotism to help the economy. Money paid to people with less of it, even well into middle-class earners, are likely to spend that money in ways that generate wealth, because that same money gets spent again and again. In a very basic explanation, it looks like this. So a grocery store worker starts making a couple more dollars an hour, ends up with almost $200 extra or so per month, signs his kid up for the guitar lessons that kid's been wanting. The guitar teacher has some extra income, so goes out to eat at the local pizza place. In turn, the pizza place owner is able to go and buy a new scooter. That salesperson earns some commission as well and thinks it would be a fun hobby to become the new YouTube Bob Ross. He needs supplies from an art store. And then the person at the art store gets paid because of those purchases, and she goes and visits the fancy new bakery in town. The bakery needs to hire a new employee because of their higher demand. And that employee starts spiffing up their house. More goods change hands. At every single step, there's an economic boost. Money in the hands of people who had less money ends up creating more economic activity. In any version of people having access to more money, it is crucial that access be sustained for an extended period of time. From both Jesus' perspective and an economic perspective, we end up in trouble when the money gets hoarded. A very few people controlling the wealth means deep economic problems for any nation, and even worse problems for people who care about following Jesus. We believe in a gospel that provides good news for the poor, after all. So we live in a country where the highest earning 20% of people make more than half of all income. The wealth gap, how much inequality exists between the highest and lowest earners, has more than doubled from 1989 to 2016. It doesn't take much research at all to see the disparity. Amazon is one of the easiest places to look for a single example of what is happening over and over again in our country. The CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, is now worth $175 billion. The average pay for a full-time worker in an Amazon grocery store or warehouse is $15 an hour. which includes benefits like stock and incentive bonuses. Additionally, Amazon is notorious for using contract labor and part-time employees. They rely so fully on those workers, in fact, that in 2017, the median pay for Amazon employees was $28,446, reported in a filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. In other words, half of Amazon's employees made less than $28,466. Amazon now has 1 million employees. And presumably the CEO could access enough cash to give each and every one of those 1 million employees a $75,000 bonus and still have $100 billion of his own money. Getting the tool of money into the hands of most of the people instead of a few is deeply rooted in biblical justice. Our call to worship referenced both the day of Jubilee and Jesus' initial promise in Luke, the one that we read at the beginning of the series. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the prisoners, and recovery of sight to the blind, to liberate the oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. We read those words now several weeks ago, but you might not be as familiar with the promise of the year of Jubilee that is described in Leviticus 25. There it is prescribed that every 50 years, the people return to their homeland. They do not farm the land. Instead, they eat what grows naturally because of cultivation. They don't eat the second growth. As much as possible, they let the land rest from its work as they rest. Land that has been sold is returned to its original family owners in this year. Slaves are released from their bondage in the year of Jubilee. And in this law, all the ancient means of accumulating wealth are evened out again every 50 years. There are even prescriptions that the land's price decreases over that 50-year period, being sold very cheaply just before the year of Jubilee. Jubilee is a holy ideal of economic justice for a people. As far as anyone knows, there has never been a year of Jubilee celebrated. And still we are prodded to these ideals of economic justice. We envision God's reign where all God's people have enough. We continue to claim that money is a tool, not a goal, and that the work money does to take care of people is what matters to us. If you want to consider more fully the implications of money in our economy, I recommend checking out the moral budget put out by the Poor People's Campaign. Here's a link that will take you to a website to download it. You'll have to type in the link, not click it. I'm not that tech savvy. But the budget is well researched and provides links and access to documents and studies and websites. The documents they're drawing this budget from are bipartisan or nonpartisan, and the research behind the budget is robust. The Poor People's Campaign is rooted in the Christian hope for a just economy, especially justice for our poorest neighbors, even as the movement relies on interfaith relationships too. That budget might end up taking you down roads you never knew existed. But this election season, consider who is talking about something resembling God's economy of justice. Consider how we use money as a tool to make our world better for everyone. Consider what God would choose for the economy that we interact with every single day. It is undoubtedly a different sort of justice, but it remains a deep hope for us all. Amen.